Hey guys, and happy Wednesday. I wanted to hop on here and I'm really excited to hop on here today. I have my really great friend and nurse practitioner, Cynthia Thurlow, here with me. She is the creator of CHT Wellness, and she also has her functional nutrition certification. And so I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself, and then we're going to dive into gut health and why that's important and why it's so significant in your weight loss and your wellness journey. So I'll go ahead and let Cynthia introduce herself to you guys and kind of give a little bit about her background.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lindsay. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm going to cross my fingers that my kids and my dogs will be quiet while we're interviewing one another. So my name is Cynthia Thurlow. I am a nurse practitioner and also a functional nutritionist. And what I'm really passionate about is talking to people about the inherent power in food in terms of supporting our health. And I always like to mention that I'm trained in traditional Western medicine. So for years, I wrote prescriptions, I put Band-Aids on things, but what I find much more powerful and much more impactful is just teaching people how to eat whole, real food, nutrient-dense food. And I've kind of created a niche working with women, and really delighted to be here tonight, chatting with you all and talking about gut health, which is one of my favorite topics.
Yay. Well, I'm so happy to have you. I've been watching you for the last 9 months or however long it's been, and you've just been such an inspiration, just such a wealth of knowledge. And, I really wanted to come on here and talk about gut health today because that is a core tenet to several of my programs that I offer my clients. And it's something that we really dive into with the Faster Way to Fat Loss and the Fast Track to Fit. So, I just kind of wanted to talk to you and ask you some questions, a lot of questions that I get asked. And I just figured, going straight to the source, the expert, and asking all of these questions. So why is gut health so important, and why is it such a necessity for weight loss?
Yeah, those are two great questions. So first and foremost, in functional medicine, functional nutrition, we really believe that gut health is foundational to our overall health. So if you have a healthy gut, your immunity is going to be on key, meaning you're not going to get sick. I mean, I'm sure everyone that's listening or watching tonight understands the interrelationship between lots of stress and eating crappy food and not taking care of yourself and getting sick. We know that it helps us absorb our food properly. We know that it affects our mood. So the bulk of our neurotransmitters, which are those little chemical messengers in our body, are produced in our gut. So sometimes we will self-medicate, if you will, with certain foods to boost our serotonin, our feel-good hormone. And, the other piece is that we know that the gut is so integral in helping us convert hormones. And so if anyone's on thyroid medication or has thyroid disease, if your gut's unhealthy, that's going to impact other hormonal health as well. So it's really comprehensive from head to toe, your moods, immunity, blood sugar, all of those things are impacted by our gut health. And to touch on the other question you mentioned about weight loss, so we know that there are lots of beneficial bacteria in our gut, but if we have a really crappy, cruddy, standard American diet, that impacts the interrelationship between the good and the non-beneficial bacteria. And we know there are certain types of bacteria that need to be present to help support weight loss. So I think you bring up a really good point about the fact that the quality of foods that we're eating absolutely impact all these things we've talked about. But then incidentally, they also impact our ability to lose weight. And so really important piece. And I know something that you really probably address and dial in on with your own clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so informational, everything that you're mentioning about, the gut and the good gut flora and having that, and really just helping to move things through your body and cleanse your body. So what do you feel out of, whether it's our diet or, anything else going on with our bodies, what do you feel actually makes the gut become so sick?
Oh, well, I think a lot of it's, inferior foods. When I say standard American diet, that's really referring to like lots of processed foods, things that comes in bags and, chips and things like that. A box or a bag is usually my qualifier. Sometimes canned foods aren't all that bad, but typically things that are processed in a plant or in a facility. And so we know that disrupts this very delicate, and we use the term microbiome, but it's really the whole expanse of our gut. And can, impact our health and our immunity. And so I always remind people that, we are what we eat, that moniker that I heard growing up. It's definitely one of those things that is so important to do. So I always start, kind of foundationally and recommend that people really think about the quality of the foods they're eating. So if you're eating a highly processed diet, if you're eating a lot of sugar, if you have stress that's out of control, and who doesn't have stress, but I'm talking about the kind of stress that's relentless. You're not getting enough sleep. You are getting up and doing crazy workouts and you're not taking care of your body. Inflammation, it's something that I've been talking about in a lot of interviews as of late, but inflammation can be good for our body, but bad. But some of the foods that we eat can actually drive that and make that, can make that problematic. And then also when there's an imbalance in the gut microflora, you can get things like candida or parasites or, things that we don't want to have. And that can further drive some of the health issues that we see when our gut is not optimally primed.
Right. And that actually kind of segues me into my next question, which is, what are the common symptoms that you see in your clients that make it evident that gut health is the issue? And so like, if anybody in our audience is watching and they're like, oh, I think that's what's going on with me, or I have that, what kind of symptoms can they look for to know that it might be an underlying gut issue?
Yeah. So I would say things like bloating. If someone says to me, I'll eat a steak dinner and I feel like it sits in my stomach for 2 days. So something to suggest the digestion's actually, impaired. Reflux symptoms, lots of reflux symptoms, if they get burning in their esophagus or lots of burping and belching, it goes back to that food and mood. So obviously if digestion is off, it's going to impact your mood, whether you're really sad, really anxious, really depressed. And then brain fog, just feeling like you can't think, clearly. Or the other thing that I know as nurses, we often talk to our patients about, constipation and diarrhea are not normal. So if you're having that chronically, I recently had a really nice woman that I've been working with, and she told me she had a bowel movement once a week. And I said, that's not normal. That means things are not communicating and you're not activating the right processes in your body to break down food. So if you've got things moving too slowly or too quickly through your gut, that's another sign that something potentially is of issue. But I would say the number one thing, Lindsay, that people talk a lot about is they just feel like they can't lose weight. And so that can almost always, there's a contributing factor to what's going on in their gut. So just key things that I think about when I'm talking to clients when they report those symptoms, that there could be something going on with their digestive process and gut health.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. I mean, I have a lot of clients me and tell me, I'm having such a hard time losing weight, or I feel so tired, or I have that afternoon slump. And one of the first things I say, or even people with like skin things, is I say, have you dialed in on your nutrition? How are you eating? Are you eating out in the processed foods? And like you said, the things in packages. So it's just amazing to me how much food can heal you, but at the same time, certain foods can also hurt you. Because I always feel like, I've always been an advocate that food is medicine, and I really feel like using food as medicine in a preventative way will help to alleviate a lot of the symptoms.
Absolutely.
So if there was somebody in the audience that was watching this interview and they felt like they had some of those symptoms, where do you think that they could start to increase? What's either the number one thing or a few things in the beginning that you would recommend that they start to do to increase that gut health?
Yeah, so I would say first and foremost, you need to consume less processed food. So that's the first thing. I generally recommend they introduce one new vegetable every day, because I feel like it's easy for people to eat fruit, but they need more vegetables. There should be like a 3-to-1 ratio, and that's usually what I say, but we start with one. Consume more water, because we know chronic dehydration drives a lot of issues. That can drive brain fog. That can drive inability to lose weight. That can drive, chronic pain and things like that. And then dialing in, I always touch on this stuff, but dialing in on stress, because if you're stressed, your body is not in a digestive mode. That's one important caveat that I want to make sure I really emphasize, is that your body cannot be stressed out and digest food. It is completely physiologically impossible. So you want to tap into the parasympathetic, or that kind of rest and repose state in your body. So I always recommend that you sit for 15 minutes while you're eating at least one meal a day. That's another thing. And then an easy thing that they can do is, there's so many great probiotic rich foods. I would say those would be the 4 things, but integrating, even if they try kombucha tea, if they try sauerkraut, fermented vegetables, or kefir, There's so many good options for people to try. I would say just try, much like I tell my children, have at least a thank you bite. Definitely, kind of ensure that you're trying new food. So those 4 things I think are reasonable and feasible, irrespective of how bad your diet is to start with, or, irrespective of your budget. They're easy things that people can do.
Okay, wonderful. So a few foods that you recommend were the kombucha, any probiotic rich foods. Now, how do you feel about like yogurt, dairy? Because I know dairy, some people feel like it might have some bloating aspects or inflammation. So how do you feel about dairy and or just yogurt in general?
What I would say is that obviously everyone's an individual, and some people will find that it's just easier to omit it from their diet. I kind of feel like if you're going to have dairy, you should have full fat dairy. It should be organic. So, organic full fat Greek yogurt that is not flavored, so that you can add some stevia, you could add some fruit, you could add nuts or seeds, raw cheese. And for those that aren't familiar with it, it's unpasteurized cheese, not meant to be scary and freaky, but it's more easily digestible. And so I would encourage people to at least try a few foods. I think what we find is that the most inflammatory foods, the foods that can sometimes give people the most problems, are things like gluten and dairy and processed sugar. So I think it's really bio-individual. And actually, I like raw cheese. I don't eat a lot of dairy, but I tolerate that just fine. So I think it really depends on the person. So overall, I would say organic, full fat. That's the caveat. It needs to be full fat because fat keeps you satiated, lights up your taste buds, makes you happy. All this low fat, non-fat stuff should just be thrown in the garbage because it's full of chemicals.
I totally agree.
And when I started in medicine 20 years ago, the feeling was that you needed to have fat was the basis for making us all sick. And now that's oftentimes I have to kind of dispel those myths and explain to people you don't need to be fat phobic. Fat is meant to be our friend. It's not something that we should be fearful of. So.
Right, I totally agree. So good, high quality, organic, high fat or full fat milk or dairy if you're going to choose to go with the dairy. So that way that you're not getting all of the chemicals. And Correct. We did have a question from Sarah. She is wondering if kombucha is safe while you're nursing.
That's a good question. I would think that if you're getting a kombucha that's been, and when I say mass produced in a factory where they've got fairly stringent quality control, it's probably fine. I mean, obviously, most Western medicine trained providers don't get a lot of nutrition training. So I would assume that the OB would say, well, I don't know. Yeah. I would say that, obviously for safety purposes, I would always discuss that with your primary care provider or your OB. But, a good quality kombucha in small quantities, because obviously some babies, that might be a little bit too much for them to handle if they're breastfeeding. But in small quantities, I think should be fine. I mean, my children drink kombucha, so I don't think I've ever read anything that suggests. But if someone's making kombucha that's sitting on their sink and their counter and that's the kombucha you're choosing to drink, I probably would opt for not doing that while you're breastfeeding.
Okay. And now if somebody didn't want to do the kombucha, what is an alternative, not necessarily fermented foods that they might be able to ingest, or maybe a supplement like a probiotic supplement maybe for nursing? And
so the basis of probiotic rich foods is that there's some degree of fermentation. So certainly a good quality probiotic. The ones that I kind of rotate through are soil or spore based. There are 2 different kinds. Megaspore is the spore based one that is a really high quality. Another option is Prescripticis, that's another brand, or Clear Labs are 3 that I really like and I use quite often with my clients. And those typically you have to get them through either a healthcare provider or through a nutritionist. They don't typically sell them over the counter, but they're really good quality, really high potency. So you get enough microorganisms. A lot of things that you find in the grocery store or Costco are dead. So you'll pay a lot of money for a product that isn't actually going to be all that beneficial. So I always say, let the buyer beware. You definitely want third-party testing, which essentially means you want to know that someone else has verified that what's in that supplement actually is there. And that's one good way if you don't have access to a healthcare provider who offers that as an option, that you just make sure you do your due diligence. I think that's really important because I see a lot of people who will go to Costco and buy a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, it's probably dead. It probably isn't beneficial. It won't hurt you, but you probably spent quite a bit of money on it. So.
Right. No, those are great tips. And I know that I have been taking probiotics and I'm trying to figure out, the right ones for my body. Sometimes different strains are kind of funky with my body. And so, just, to the audience, making sure that you find something that works for you and that, for your body and, kind of going that route. So to wrap it up, is there anything else as far as gut health that you would like to add? I mean, really, you guys, if you're feeling fatigued, if you're feeling like you have inflammation in your body and pain, and you're not going to the bathroom regularly, I would highly recommend maybe dialing into your nutrition and thinking about your gut health and what you could be doing to improve your gut health, whether that is adding a probiotic or adding fermented foods like kombucha into your daily routine. An apple cider vinegar, I know that that's really good for your gut health and helps aid in digestion and things like that. So those are just small things that you could start to do on a daily basis, just like Cynthia said, adding a new vegetable every day or every week, whatever you can tolerate, just to make sure that you're getting that gut health in. So Cynthia, is there anything else that you want to add? I know that you have some free guides for people that can really help guide them through their nutrition. So if you wanted to kind of talk about that for a second, that's
I have right now. It's ironic. I was talking to my VA today about a different option that I was going to do as another free guide, but I have a couple of guides that are on hormonal health. There's one on toxins on my website because that's something that comes up with some frequency. I've got lots of free content on my website, lots of blog posts that all relate to topics that Lindsay and I have talked about today. You were asking me before we jumped on, were there any other things other than what we kind of touched on? And so there's one supplement that I sometimes will recommend to clients if there's a concern that they really have gut integrity issues, and you can buy this in Whole Foods, you can buy it online. It's called L-glutamine. It's a powder, and you would take that on an empty stomach. And if someone's got concern if they have leaky gut or just overall like gut health, L-glutamine can also help with decreasing sugar cravings. I see a lot of my clients that will do that on their own, that they recognize that when they take that, their sugar cravings are better. So that's an easy thing that people can try once or twice a day, and super healthy, very gut nourishing, and not so crazy expensive. Every once in a while, there are things that people will ask me about and I'll say, well, that's fine. But that's actually something that is expensive. And for some people that may not be, feasible or reasonable. But one other point about probiotics is that sometimes if people take probiotics, their gut motility will slow down, meaning they'll go from having regular bowel movements to then things aren't happening as efficiently as they once were. So to your point about bioindividuality, that's really where I try to explain to clients that, going low and slow is fine. You may have to just take one once a day, and that's totally fine. Just recognizing that we're all individuals and that, our own digestion is very unique. So just recognizing that there's lots of great resources. And I'm glad you mentioned apple cider vinegar, which is something that you can take individually if you feel like that it helps with your digestion. But also you can make salad dressings and things like that are really delicious. So easy ways to get that into your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad that you touched on the L-glutamine, because one of my staples, or something that has actually started me on my gut health journey, was drinking bone broth for the collagen. And so that is something that, that you can absolutely do. It's not expensive. It's a little bit more expensive than just regular chicken broth. You can make it in your home if you want. I prefer not to, because it does have a smell for two days in your home. But you can do bone broth, because that collagen, that protein, is going to help lubricate your gut. And then the same thing, having a collagen supplement like Vital Proteins, collagen peptides. I always talk about those as well. But those are other great things that you can add to just your meals and your smoothies and things that you bake with, just to help with that gut health, even when you're not even thinking about it.
It's funny. My kids actually drink an adrenal creamsicle before they go to bed that helps with sleep, and it has Vital Proteins in it, which is a great way to get more collagen into your diet. A lot of clients will tell me they feel like they're that their skin improves. And so another important kind of, touch-all piece is that our skin is a reflection of what's going on internally. So if someone has acne or eczema or psoriasis, it's an indication that something is impaired in their gut in terms of they're just not, either they've got leaky gut or that there's some inflammation that's going on. I saw someone's question popped up, but I didn't get to it really quickly. Lindsay, were you making beef bone broth or chicken?
So I did chicken. I tried the beef bone broth, and for some reason, I just felt like I was excreting beef bone broth. It was like my new perfume. So I went and stuck with the chicken bone broth. And the kind that I use, I think it's called Pacifico or Pacifica. Okay. I get it from Whole Foods, or even just any of the organic ones. I can find it, excuse me, at Kroger, any of your local grocery stores. That's where I've been finding my bone broth. Do you have a certain one that you recommend?
No, the reason why I was asking, I usually make chicken bone broth, but I will buy beef, because beef bone broth, when you're making it, your house stinks. That's why I was asking, and not in a positive way, I hope no one comes by my house kind of way. So chicken bone broth can be super easy, and we tend to have it on hand, but you're right. The nice thing is that nowadays there are some high quality bone broths that people can actually get from their local grocery stores. And I think, the difference between bone broth and regular broth is that bone broth has, the bones that the animal had have been demineralized. So you get the benefit of, like you mentioned, the collagen, all the, minerals that are in the bones that you then consume, and they're very bioavailable, meaning they've already been broken down so your body can use them really efficiently. One other thing that can be really helpful, for gut health are things like aloe vera juice or slippery elm tea. And I was explaining this to a client the other day. Slippery elm tea is, and it's a really kind of a gross word. It produces, it's kind of like mucusy. So for a lot of people, it can help soothe their gut. And so I always prefer not calling it mucilaginous, which is just really kind of a disgusting word. But I explain that it's really soothing, really beneficial. A lot like, you mentioned with the bone broth. Some people like to sip bone broth all day long, or they can sip tea throughout the day. And just an easy way that you can kind of add those things into your day without really inconveniencing yourself very much.
Yeah. I could sit here and talk to you for hours about gut health and nursing and everything moving forward. So I think that that is probably a pretty good place to stop. I think we've covered a lot of the beginnings of where people care about their gut health. A few things that they can stay away from, like the processed foods. Anything in a package, anything that has a label on it and has all those chemicals, those things are going to really affect the gut health. And then slowly adding, again, those vegetables, bone broth, kombucha, fermented foods, and teas and things like that. So I truly, truly appreciate you being here. And I get so much knowledge just from listening to you and watching you and following you. So I really appreciate you being here.
No, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure. We'll have to do this again.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, you have a great night, and I hope everyone else has a great night as well. Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome.